Level 87, Subsidiary DARPA Labs, Cheyenne Mountain Complex, Colorado Springs, Colorado 2176 AD. Wait, they are related to us? President Lopez asked incredulously as she stared at the hologram of Admiral Thompson standing in front of her. If it wasn't for the occasional minor flicker, she would not have been able to tell Thompson was not actually there in person. Yes, Madam President. I ran the genetic test with Ambassador Hrethner 3 times to verify the results. All 3 times, the test verified a 98.97% genetic match. The Magnati samples they provided are an even closer match at 99.23%. There is no question about it. We are related to the Malit, and they are not bullshitting us about our ancestors. Well, I'll be damned. I guess this explains why they seem to favor us over the other species, despite treating us like we are barely sentient homunculi incapable of wiping our own asses. Admiral Thompson spit out the water he was drinking, making her flinch at the incoming spray of spittle, before the water vanished at the edge of the hollow field a meter in front of her. She waited for the Admiral to stop choking and laughing at her statement before pressing him for further information on the unexpected Malit revelations. He finally managed to regain control of himself, placing the cup down on something out of view before looking at her with an embarrassed expression. "My apologies, Madam." She held up a hand to stop him as she smirked. "Carl, sometimes I forget I am the president and not among Pathfinders anymore. Let's move on, and I'll try not to make you choke anymore." "Yes, Madam President," Thompson replied. "Mia, Carl, we've known each other for over 20 years. It's just us 2 here. So why did they hide this from us for all this time? Are they embarrassed of us or what?" she asked seriously. Thompson looked frustrated, taking a deep breath before answering her. "They were concerned that we would suffer severe societal unrest and possibly civil wars if it was revealed that we were the descendants of another species placed on Earth by the Malit. I think their concerns are skewed by their religious and cultural mores. I got the distinct impression the Malit thought we would descend into a planet-wide internecine conflict based on our religions." Huffing indignantly, Lopez tried not to let the anger she was feeling bleed into her response as she replied to Thompson, who looked just as pissed as she felt. "Well, that's insulting. So they really think we are still murderous zealots incapable of respecting each other's beliefs. They do know the First Amendment is the first one for a good reason, right?" "Mia, I explained this to both Hrethner and the Council of Elders. Hrethner accepted my reasoning, but the Council is adamant that based on our history, their concerns are completely justified. And to be honest with you, they do have a valid point. Look at what happened during and after World War III. You had the Caliphate Jihads and the Eastern Coalition purges, the European Crusades, the North American Reclamation, the South American Renacimiento. Yeah, okay, I get your point, Carl," she interrupted, almost feeling ashamed to be human as the Admiral listed the ethnic and religious conflicts that almost destroyed their species and the world. "So they shoved our past in our faces, even though we have left such things in the past where they belong. And they still think revealing the truth will cause us to start killing each other again." "Got it." Thompson held up his hands placatingly before continuing. "I know it is insulting and frustrating, Mia, but they also highlighted the great strides we have made as well. They have been impressed with our willingness to fight and die for others, and I can almost swear the counselors seemed like they were extremely proud of humanity and what we have done." "Well, that is nice of them. I am so grateful they can see that we have some virtues besides genociding ourselves on a regular basis. We shall bask in their magnanimity," she replied sarcastically as she silenced the message alert on her wristcom. She quickly glanced at it, seeing it was from Bandit. He would have to wait until she was finished. Thompson chuckled at what she had said while leaning to the side to get something out of viewing range. His hand came back holding a data pad, and he gave her a sly smile as he tapped on it several times. "Would you like to see what they look like, Mia?" "What kind of question is that? Of course I do, Carl. Show me what you got." She responded, smiling at his attempt to lighten the mood a little bit. He nodded and flicked his fingers over the data pad. Next to his hologram, another one shimmered into view, and she gasped as the image fully resolved. A hairless, androgynous humanoid slowly rotated in front of her as she leaned closer to examine it. Next to the rotating image was a small holoscreen that displayed the scan results. Ambassador Hrethnir, species human. Height, 162.3 centimeters. Weight, 96.7 kilograms. Sex, undetermined. Age, 312 years. Under the biometric data were the genetic analysis results of the testing performed by the Admiral, as well as other pertinent scan results. The entire skeleton was made of a metallic alloy, and 42% of Hrethnir's body was comprised of biomechanical components that enhanced numerous physiological functions within the body. Utterly fascinated by what she was seeing, Lopez continued to stare at the rotating image. The eyes were biomechanical, and the skin was infused with nanotech and metallic fibers. There was a large port at the base of the skull and 16 smaller ones studded along the spinal column. The brain had data processors embedded within it that connected to the ports. Wow, so this is what they look like. I'm surprised the ambassador allowed you to take such detailed scans. It seems a little out of character for a species so intent on hiding themselves. The Admiral's face reddened and he looked down at the data pad as he replied to her statement. It was blatantly obvious that he was purposefully not looking at her before he started stammering. I didn't ask to take the scans, Madam President. Republic Intelligence provided me with a stealth nanoscanner for situations such as this, and I forgot to deactivate it before the meeting. Hrethnir detected the scans immediately and lectured me on the crudeness of the device for surveillance purposes. It provided me with scanning frequencies that would not be detected and allowed me to keep the scans. Allies should know who they are fighting with. Is all Hrethnir had to say about the situation? Damn it, Carl, what were you thinking? Do you know what a dumpster fire this would have caused if the ambassador decided to accuse you of violating him? Lopez practically screamed, the Admiral instinctively coming to attention as she chewed him out. I apologized profusely, Madam President, and explained that I merely forgot to deactivate the device. Hrethnir laughed at the situation and told me there would be no sanctions levied on me or the Republic. Lopez fumed as she stared daggers at Thompson, imagining the diplomatic and political fallout that was narrowly averted. It could have destroyed all the goodwill the Republic had spent many years carefully cultivating with the Malit domain. She whispered a quick prayer of thanks before replying to the Admiral, almost laughing at the ridiculous shade of red that colored his neck and his face from embarrassment. I'm going to have a word with the intelligence director regarding the morons working for him that like to give out untested spy devices like frigging lollipops. I hope you learned your lesson this time. I did, Madame President. I am sorry, and it won't happen again, he replied, staring at a point on the wall behind her. Feeling bad for yelling at him, she smiled at him before speaking again. At ease, Carl. Mistakes happen, and I'm sorry for losing my shit. I immediately thought of all the possible repercussions that could have happened and got carried away. Let's move on, okay? He relaxed his stance slightly and took his eyes off the wall before looking at her and nodding solemnly. Shall I continue, Madam President? He asked, all business after what just happened. Yes, Admiral, please continue, she replied, regretting the change in the tone of the briefing. She always looked forward to her private meetings with Thompson. It was one of the rare times she could be herself, and not the President with an old friend. The Malit know the Balricans are coming, and I am assuming they intercepted our encrypted comm chatter regarding the rescue mission and our disastrous first contact with them. The Council is of the opinion that the insectoid fleets would only be able to keep them at bay for 3, maybe 4 solar months before they are eliminated. They estimated 6 solar months before they arrive in our region of space and launch an attack on the insectoid worlds to wipe them out. Lopez took a deep breath before slowly blowing air through her pursed lips as she thought about the Malit calculations and the current state of Republic mobilization efforts before replying to him. So we possibly have just under 3 months before the lizards get here. What are the Malit plans regarding the defense of the quadrant, and what are their intentions for the Republic? Thompson looked back down at the data pad and used a stylus on it for a few seconds before looking back up at her. He flicked his fingers over the data pad, and several small screens appeared. The Malit want to create a grand alliance to confront the threat, and they want us to take charge of all the military forces of the quadrant except for the Malit expeditionary ships. The Malit forces will fight alongside us and heed our recommendations, according to the elder counselors I spoke with. They will use a combination of incentives and sanctions to get the other powers to join the alliance and accept Republic military control over the defense forces. They also want us to get the Kilthek Dominion involved by doing whatever we have to get them to ally with us and commit their forces. Lopez frowned at him, not understanding why the Mallet wanted the Republic to lead the defense forces. They were the youngest species, and though they were now the second most powerful military force after the Mallet, they were still considered only a middle power by the other species. Why do the Mallet want us to lead the defense forces? I would have thought that they would claim that role, as it makes the most sense. I seriously doubt the others would accept our control except for the Commonwealth and Aurora's hive. Did they explain their reasoning to you, Admiral? Thompson regarded her with a thoughtful expression before replying to her. I asked the same questions you just did, and the Mallet provided me with some insight into our Magnati ancestors. Apparently they were the preeminent warrior species, and the Mallet consider us the Magnati reborn again. They are convinced the only way to win is for us to lead the forces. Thompson looked back down at the datapad and tapped on it before flicking his fingers again, and all the individual screens started merging to form a much larger blank screen in front of her. The blank hollow screen came to life, and they both watched as a massive battle was displayed, tens of thousands of ships dancing with each other in a violent maelstrom of destruction and death. The Allied vessels had green tags, and specific ships were highlighted as Magnati and Wansho. The Magnati ships were massive dreadnoughts, and they looked menacing. They were long, sleek, and of the darkest black that seemed to absorb nearby light particles. They were vaguely cigar-shaped, and almost the entire hull was studded with a variety of weapon systems and sensor relays. The Wansho ships were much smaller and agile, and they were in small formations that resembled hunting packs as they weaved around the Magnati dreadnoughts. Lopez gasped as a Magnati dreadnought, and the 20 escorting Wansho ships with it charged directly into the center of a large Balrican formation of over 100 ships. The Magnati dreadnought fired broadsides from both the port and starboard side, their railgun turrets firing hundreds of rounds as dozens of armored weapons hatches slid to the side. Out of them emerged other weapons, the plasma torpedoes and particle beams adding to the carnage, as dozens of Balrican ships disappeared under the overwhelming volume of fire tearing into them. The smaller Wansho ships darted into the Balrican formation and ganged up on enemy battleships, their incredibly powerful warbeams spearing through the much larger vessels before moving on. Elsewhere throughout the battle space, the same scene played out as the severely outnumbered Magnati and Wansho ships wreaked havoc throughout the Balrican formations. Translated battle comms were playing, and Lopez could hear them clearly, the Magnati commanders expertly wielding their tiny fleet formations with deadly skill as they coordinated assaults. The Balricans in comparison were rigid and tactically inflexible, and they could not seem to counter the seemingly random and unique fighting styles of the Magnati commanders opposing them. In less than 5 minutes of video, Lopez saw 22 Magnati dreadnoughts and 112 Wansho hunter-killers completely rout 3 large Balrican formations and destroy over 200 ships for only 2 heavily damaged hunter-killers. We fight like the Magnati, Lopez realized as she continued to watch the Allied ships tear through the Balrican fleet. It was eerie to see just how similar the Magnati fighting style and tactics were to the Republic commanders fighting against the much larger insectoid fleets. There was a difference, though, and Lopez could see it as she compared the Magnati and Republic fighting abilities. It was so strange to see the Magnati fighting in a way that made sense to her. Republic commanders were far more aggressive and daring, and their tactics were more refined, probably because of tech limitations the Magnati commanders did not have to compensate for. The video ended, and she looked at Thompson with a thoughtful expression. He looked down at the datapad again and tapped on it a few times, before looking back up and speaking. As you can see, Madam President, we fight like the Magnati. This is why the Mallet want us to lead the Alliance forces. They said watching us fight the insectoids reminded them of our ancestors fighting the Balricans long ago. The children have surpassed their parents, is what Hrethnir said. He looked back down and tapped on the datapad one more time before pointing to the now blank screen. It activated again, showing a red giant system devoid of planets. The video zoomed in, and she could now see an asteroid orbiting the Sun at a distance approximate to Mercury's orbit in the Sol system. The video zoomed in again on the planetoid, and data appeared alongside it that gave the size of the planetoid in Republic numerals. The data displayed the diameter and estimated mass, which seemed unusually low to Lopez. It was slightly smaller than the asteroid Ceres, and Lopez was still trying to figure out why its mass was so low when video of the interior was displayed, and her question was answered. The illuminated interior had been hollowed out, and Lopez gasped as she saw dozens of massive, cigar-shaped ships with black hulls that were covered with numerous weapons and sensor apparatus. There were other black ships, much smaller but still deadly-looking, that numbered in the hundreds as she looked upon row after row of ships that went out of view beyond the curved horizon. She gaped at the sheer number of ships before looking back at the massive vessels she had first seen, her brain still not properly processing what her eyes were showing it. They looked almost exactly like the Magneti dreadnoughts she had been watching on the screen before, and she looked at Thompson in shock as she tried to make sense of what he was showing her. Thompson grinned at her, his eyes twinkling with delight as he pointed at the screen and explained what she was seeing. Our cousins have been preparing for the possibility of an invasion of our quadrant by the Balricans, or another expanding power, for many, many years as they waited for us to rejoin them in space. There are 10 such bases hidden throughout the Malit domain, and they have been holding them in trust for humanity until we reclaimed our heritage. These bases and ships are a gift to us from the Malit domain, and they said the time has come for us to claim what is rightfully ours. The 10 bases are null space capable and fully functional, and they are ours as well. They are essentially mobile bases built to Magneti specifications and can both build and repair ships. They are fully autonomous, and we are to take these bases back to Republic space. There is a complete list of all the ships inside the 10 bases, and I am putting it up on the screen now. The list has all pertinent information regarding ship classes, weaponry, armor, and shield specs. Thompson flicked his fingers over the datapad, and the interior video of the base was replaced with a list of figures and images of the ships by classes. Leviathan-class dreadnoughts, 237. Vengeance-class battleships, 1,282. Guardian-class heavy cruisers, 2,546. Dauntless-class heavy destroyers, 4,312. Fearless-class frigates, 1,593. Total ships available for combat, 9,970. Lopez stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the technical details under the ship lists. They were a summary of the armor compositions, shield ratings, weapon specifications, everything. She started feeling overwhelmed by all the information and the unexpected gift from the Malit domain. She looked away from the screen and back at the Admiral, who looked very pleased with himself. They are just giving us all of this, with no strings attached or limitations. This almost feels like a trap, Carl. Before we accept, we better look in the mouth of this gift horse and be damn sure. Thompson quickly replied as he added another, smaller screen next to the large one. A wall of Malit text appeared, with a translated version in Republic Standard next to it. There are restrictions, of course. The ships will only work for humans, as all the systems are secured and can only be operated by people with Magneti, Malit, and human DNA. Also, the technology on these ships is reserved for our use alone. If we get caught tampering with or trying to transfer the technology to any other species, the AIs on the ships will shut the ships down and notify the Malit. The ships would become deactivated, and all systems would be wiped. If we attack other species except for recognized enemies, the AIs will deactivate the ships, notify the Malit, and wipe the systems. It is different if we are attacked and defending ourselves. The ships can only be worked on and repaired in the bases the Malit are providing us. Any attempt to use our own shipyards will result in the same deactivation and security purge by the AI. If we honor and abide by these restrictions, the ships are ours and will function normally for us. Lopez was scanning the text as she listened to Thompson list the major restrictions, seeing that he was mostly correct. She would have specialists go over it more carefully to ensure there were no loopholes or mistakes that would wind up biting them in the ass later. Okay, Carl. Let's wrap this up. I need to think about this and discuss it with my advisors before we pull the trigger on this. I will call you when I have decided, okay? He nodded before saluting and then closing the channel on his end. The connection ended and his hologram disappeared, leaving her alone in the office she had taken the call in. She felt incredibly tired as she looked at the analog clock on the wall. It was only 0935, and she still had the whole day to get through. She was just about to gather her things and head back to the labs when she remembered the message alert on her wristcom from Bandit. She sighed wearily and accessed the message, seeing that he had attached an urgent tag to it. That was unusual, and she set up another secure channel before accessing the message and calling him back. Another hologram appeared, showing Bandit standing in front of the comm console in the Hive Nexus. She could see many drones in the background within the viewing range of the holo camera as they walked in and out of range. She smiled at him. "Bandit, my apologies. I was in the middle of an important briefing with Admiral Thompson. I hope you weren't waiting at the comm panel the whole time." He smiled back, his yellow eyes looking into hers as he replied, "I was, Madam President, but I do not experience time anxiety like biologicals do. However, Aurora has been growing increasingly impatient with the delay." Aurora stepped into the viewing range of the holo camera when Bandit said her name, and Lopez could almost swear she looked pissed, even though insectoids could not make discernible facial expressions. Aurora immediately began rapidly signing, and the speaker device on her thorax started translating her thoughts as her gloved claws moved frantically. "Hive Mother, much time we were waiting. Time we do not have much left. I shared thoughts with the Hive Mother of the Empire. My sister has found me. She called the Hive Mother, and the Hive Mother within told me I must speak to her and make peace. The Hive Mother wants peace." Lopez looked at Bandit in confusion, not understanding what the hell Aurora was talking about with all the Hive Mothers and sister references. It was already confusing to her when Aurora spoke of Hive Mothers. She could not ever really figure out who she was referencing half the time. Bandit seemed to understand what was confusing her and signed to Aurora for a few seconds before turning back to Lopez and explaining what was going on. Aurora's sister queen has become Hive Mother by killing the old Hive Mother, the one that launched the attacks on the Commonwealth. It was the new Hive Mother, her sister, that withdrew all the insectoid forces back to the Empire. The new Hive Mother found Aurora and they shared thoughts. Aurora's Hive Mother within, the ancestor that guides her, encouraged her to respond to the new Hive Mother and make peace. This new Hive Mother of the Insectoid Empire wishes to make peace with the Republic and ally with us and the other powers to fight against the coming enemy. She wishes to share thoughts with you. Lopez stared at them disbelievingly as Bandit summarized what had happened in a way she could understand. Aurora was staring at her with her large black eyes and started signing again. "Hive Mother, I have learned animal faces. I see you think this is a falsehood, and I'm angry with you for this. She's the sister I shared thoughts with you about, the one out of all sisters I loved. She has no falsehoods, only promises and truth in her thoughts. I have never made falsehoods to you, in thoughts or action. This is not a deception, and you must share thoughts with my sister." Lopez's face reddened in embarrassment at being caught by Aurora and failing to maintain control of her expressions. She scrambled to regain control of the situation as her mind raced, feeling under incredible pressure as Aurora continued to stare at her. Feeling overwhelmed by the events with the Malit, the secret ships, and now this Hive Mother situation, she leaned her head down slightly and rubbed her face with her hands. She had never felt more exhausted than she did right now in her entire life, and she could feel her mind struggling to keep up with all of it. She felt as if the office walls were closing in on her, and she focused on her breathing. "Now is not the time to lose control, Mia. You are the president. You chose this." Looking back up at them, she thought about the ramifications of making real peace with the Insectoid Empire. A large portion of the Republic military was tied up patrolling the borders of the Neo-Commonwealth as they recovered from the bloody civil war and rebuilt their depleted forces. The Republic and the Neo-Commonwealth fleets would be able to withdraw from the borders and commit the additional combat forces to reinforce the fleets that would be fighting the coming invasion. They would no longer have to worry about fighting on one front while defending against a possible attack on another. The only real issue was how the Commonwealth members would react to this. They had suffered constant attacks from the insectoids for almost 200 years, and hundreds of billions of their dead demanded justice and revenge for the insectoids killing them. Saryx, Therax, and Varixa would understand the need to make peace with a former enemy to fight an even worse enemy than the insectoids, but the civilians would not. How could they? Such considerations were beyond the ability of the citizens. They were constantly reminded of the terrible atrocities committed by the insectoids every time they looked up at the night sky. They could see a dozen stars that were now orbited by lifeless planets. These worlds once teemed with hundreds of billions of Commonwealth citizens just like them. Still, she had to try. I ask your forgiveness for not believing you, Aurora. It is just something that I was not expecting, and if you say your sister, the new Hive Mother, is different, then I accept it as the truth. How do you want to do this? I do not think you should go to the Empire, Aurora. I do not think that would be wise right now. Would she come to you, or to a neutral location along the border? She waited impatiently as the holographic claw signs over the comm panel finished translating her words for Aurora. We need to find a better way for us to communicate, she thought to herself as Aurora started signing again. I grant you the pardon you ask for, Hive Mother. I understand your thoughts and they are already forgotten. My sister cannot come to us. She can never leave the brooding chamber ever again. Only death can release her from the birth canal, either of old age or when culled by a queen. Aurora paused, still staring at her intently. After a few moments, she resumed signing, slowing down her claw movements as if unsure of what she was saying. I ask for permission to send Bandit Friend and Luna as the envoys for my hive and your hives. My sister has promised safe passage for them both. The envoys of queens and hive mothers are sacred, and anyone who kills one is culled immediately. Even if a hive mother kills one, she would be culled by her daughters for committing such an evil act. It has been this way since the time of the first hive. Lopez found herself fascinated by what Aurora was saying, both about hive mothers being trapped in the brooding chamber and the sacred protections afforded to envoys by the insectoids. Even as alien as they were sometimes, it was nice to know that some things were the same, such as the diplomatic protection and immunities afforded to representatives and envoys. Turning her gaze to Bandit, Lopez asked him for his input. Bandit, is this something you want to do? I will not order you to go, so whatever choice you make is yours alone. Bandit replied without hesitation. I will go, Madam President. I feel it is right to attempt to make peace between Aurora and her sister. She has told me of this sister many times, and I know she misses her greatly. I also would find great joy in securing peace for the Republic I serve. Will you be allowed to take an escort, Bandit? I would feel a lot better about this if you could bring a squad of combots with you as protection. Aurora had been watching them speak and started signing again. It is expected for envoys to have drones with them to show the power and prestige of the queens and hive mothers they represent. I will send my machine soldiers with Bandit Friend and Luna. It is my right as a hive mother. I promise you that no harm will be done to them by my sister or others. Okay, Aurora, I agree with this peace effort. I will share thoughts with the other empires and inform them of what is happening. Just get your sister to agree to not attack us anymore and we will not attack them. Once we figure out a way to make an official peace treaty between us, we will sign it. Aurora signed with Bandit quickly before turning back to face her, her claws moving rapidly as the translator spoke for her. I am ashamed for doubting what you would do, Lopez Friend. I did not know how you would think about my sister's offer of peace, and I see the wrongness in my thoughts. You are very wise, Hive Mother. Even the Hive Mother within me thinks you have wisdom she has rarely seen. Thank you, Aurora, and I thank your ancestor for her kind thoughts as well. Being wise and getting others to see as I do are two very different things, unfortunately. We shall see how the governments of the other animals respond to your sister's request for peace. I hope they are wise and accept. I do too. The persecutors are coming, Hive Mother, and they are not coming for only us. The evil we have done to the animals will seem like nothing compared to what they will do to us all. We must face them together as friends if there is any hope of survival. We will all die facing them alone. I agree. Share thoughts with me again when Bandit and Luna are ready to depart, and I will provide Bandit with orders for how to be an envoy for me and the Republic. I will share thoughts with the other animals now and try to convince them to make peace with your sister in the Empire. Yes, Hive Mother. Thank you. I promise you I'll do all I can to make this peace with my sister successful. The persecutors will soon know that our hives and the animal hives fight for each other. I now depart to get my cruiser ready to send our envoys to my sister to make peace. Aurora stepped back, and Bandit ended the connection, the hologram disappearing and leaving her alone in the office again. Looking at the clock again, she shook her head in disgust when she saw that it was only 0957. Reaching into her purse on the bare desk, she searched with her fingers until she felt what she was looking for and pulled out the small, metallic, pen-sized object. It was a single-dose subdermal stim stick, and she took off the protective cap before pressing it against her neck and pushing down on the activator. It hissed, and she felt the coolness spreading from the injection site as her circulatory system carried the stimulants throughout her body. In a matter of seconds, her fatigue melted away, and she felt her eyelids stop drooping. Her doctor was going to be pissed at her for using it, but he wasn't about to lead humanity into the worst war it had ever faced, and pickling her liver was a small price to pay for saving the species. She walked out of the office, her back straight and her head held high, as she felt energized and ready to take on the rest of the day. The two Pathfinder bodyguards fell in behind her as she headed back to the labs, where the eggheads were waiting to show her the next-gen weapons tech they had been working on. She was excited to see what they had and to find out if it was ready to be implemented. They needed every possible tool available if what the Malit and Aurora had been telling them about the enemy was true. Ominion System, Automated Border Outpost 1D25, 1,893 light-years from Earth. Hrethner waited outside the medical suite as the Malit doctor finished running its scans to ensure that the awakening process had not caused any harm to the human child. The light above the door changed to a steady blue, indicating that the doctor was granting it access. Hrethner palmed the scanner and quietly entered the suite when the door slid to the side. The doctor was monitoring an array of holographic medical screens and started speaking without turning away from the displays, as its suit hands moved gracefully over multiple screens. The human child will regain consciousness shortly, Ambassador. The procedure was a success, and there are no signs of any lasting damage from the aborted engrammatic transfer procedure. It was wearing a medical exosuit, a smaller and refined version of the suits normally worn by the Malit. The specialized suit allowed for precision and the fine motor skills necessary for surgeries and medical treatments. Thank you, Doctor. I will wait here for the child to awaken. I think it is important that there is someone familiar with him when he wakes, Hrethner replied as it approached the bed. As you wish, Ambassador. I am finished here for now and will monitor the human child's condition from my office outside. Do not hesitate to call me if you need assistance. The doctor tapped on one of the screens and then left, the door hissing as it slid shut behind the physician. Hrethner stood by the bed, looking down at the human child's face as it waited for him to wake up. Within moments, the human's eyes started moving rapidly under his still-closed eyelids, and his lips parted slightly as he softly moaned. Another minute passed, and then his eyes fluttered open. Hrethner leaned slightly closer, unsure how the human was going to react to its true nature. He had yet to see a Malit outside of their exosuits, and had hoped the human would not panic as it spoke softly to him. My human child, it gladdens me to be here for your awakening. I made many prayers and supplications to the Creator for your recovery. It seems the Creator deemed my efforts worthy. The human turned his head in Hrethner's direction, following the source of the voice as he looked at it with unfocused eyes. Slowly, Hrethner could see as the human's eyes adjusted to the light and finally focusing. Umga, thirsty, the human said, his voice cracking from the long-term disuse of his vocal cords. Hrethner reached over to the side table and picked up the small hydration cup, bringing it to the human child's lips. He drank from it greedily, spilling most of the contents down the side of his face and onto his chest. "Take it slowly, my human child. I will get you more," Hrethner said soothingly as it turned to the side again and refilled the cup from the spigot by the bed. Turning back, it saw the human staring at it intently. "Honored Elder, I recognize your voice. Where am I? What happened to me?" the human said as he stared at Hrethner with wide eyes that roamed all over the implants before settling on its eyes. Hrethner felt very self-conscious about itself as the human child continued to inspect it closely. At least he wasn't reacting with fear or revulsion, it thought to itself as it responded to the child. "Yes, my human child. I am Hrethner, and this is my true form. I hope you do not find me offensive to look upon. You suffered a catastrophic neural displacement from the unsanctioned use of the engrammatic transfer device. Your brain was severely damaged, but you have been fully healed." I remember I was Shilin Domreth. I felt my younglings' bodies crack as I forced their frozen arms and legs into their death repose. I grieved for my mate Iregna, who suffered at the hands of her overlord and never came back to me. I remember everything, all the pain and suffering, the regret that the saviors did not come sooner to save my family, the fear in Yangith's eyes as it ordered me to enter the bunker and seal the door behind me. Tears were falling down the human's face, and Hrethner wanted nothing more than to embrace the child and soothe him. Instead, Hrethner tentatively placed its heavily modified right hand on top of his. The human child gripped it tightly without hesitation, surprising Hrethner with the strength of his grip as he continued to silently sob. "I'm sorry, honored elder. I cannot help it. I can't seem to—" "Do not apologize, my human. And please call me Hrethner. It is going to take some time for you to process the trauma your mind and your soul underwent. Is there anything you wish to know?" "How long was I out for? Why are you not in your suit?" he asked as he tried to use his arms to push himself up higher on the slightly elevated bed. They trembled from the exertion, the muscles struggling after the months of inactivity. Hrethner helped him by grabbing 2 extra pillows from under the bed and placing them behind the child, helping the human prop himself on them. Once the child was settled, Hrethner answered him. 107 of your Earth days as of today. As for not being in my suit, a lot has happened since we put you into an induced coma to prevent further damage to your brain. The Balricans have returned, my human child. We estimate they will reach the quadrant in less than 3 of your months. I have decided that it was time for humans to know the truth about the Malit. Just like the Magnati, you share a common heritage with the Malit. We are your cousin kin. The human child stared at Hrethner, his eyes roaming over its heavily modified face. After a few moments, he spoke again. "I see it. You look human despite your modifications. I'm sorry for staring at you, Hrethner. Are you cybernetic, or are the modifications biomechanical in nature?" "Both," Hrethner replied. When the Magneti first went into space and colonized worlds, a splinter culture left as well to pursue their own desires for augmentation and the joining of both organic and synthetic. After millennia, we developed a unique culture and forged our own path in the galaxy. We never forgot our shared heritage with the Magnetai, and we naturally were the greatest of friends and allies with them. The Magnati and the Malit joined together, and the Wansho and the Slikath joined with us a few hundred cycles later. This alliance of the 4 species formed the core of the Galactic Federation, and it was our unshakable bond with the Magneti that sustained it for millennia before the Balricans destroyed it. Malit is derived from Magnalit, which means kin of the Great Ones in the ancient ancestral tongue. The human child listened as Hrethner spoke, and he was quiet for some time after it finished speaking. "Wow, I was not expecting that. I always imagined you as either little gray aliens or something crazy like a sentient octopi species. Well, it's nice to finally meet you, cousin," the human child said as he timidly held out a hand towards Hrethner. Hrethner responded as it took the human's hand with its own and moved it up and down like it had seen done in the Republic Cultural Archives. "Ah, yes, humans, just like our Magneti kin," Like to shake hands. It is a pleasure to finally meet you, both as kin and as a friend, my human child. If you are tired, I can depart so you may rest more." The human laughed at Hrethnir's offer to leave before replying, "I've slept enough, Hrethnir, and I will be sure to tell you when I wish to rest. Would you mind staying with me for a little longer?" "Of course, whatever you wish, my child," Hrethnir responded, secretly pleased that he wanted it to stay. "I missed talking to you, and I am so grateful you have recovered." Glory to the Creator, it thought, mindful of the Creator's blessing as the human started speaking again. "Hrethnir, please call me Ray. I think it is time we use each other's names when it is just the two of us, don't you agree?" The human said, looking into Hrethnir's biomechanical eyes as he spoke. "I agree, Ray. So what would you like me to talk about?" Hrethnir asked as he sent a thought command. Out of the floor emerged a nanobot swarm that quickly assembled into a chair, and Hrethnir sat in it as he waited for the human to reply. "Why don't you finish telling me about how the war ended and the plagues? What happened to the Magnati, the Wansho, and all the others? How are we descended from the Magnati?" Hrethnir was unsure if it was appropriate to discuss such things so soon after waking up, but the look on Ray's face changed its mind. It waited for the human to finish shifting his position before starting. "I will skip forward to the events you wish to know about, and you can fill in the gaps later. The Federation pushed the Balricans off the worlds they had conquered and liberated the poor souls of those brutalized worlds. Deprived of their bases, the surviving Balrican fleets once again reverted to a guerrilla-style campaign that caused much death and destruction. Balrican ships continued to cross the expanse between the arms and replenish their losses, and we continued to build up our forces. We successfully prevented them from re-establishing bases, and the conflict settled into a form of stalemate that continued for many cycles as our fleets continued to hunt and destroy them. Still, more came, and still, we fruitlessly tried to pin down their forces and destroy them once and for all. By this time, we had finally built enough ships to fully defend our territory, limit the depredations of the hateful creatures, and form an expeditionary force large enough to invade their territory. A combined fleet of over 60,000 warships and supply vessels was launched, and they crossed the expanse to end the war. This was also the first time we used the new stellar null torpedoes we had developed. "What? Stellar torpedoes? What are those, Hrethnir?" Ray asked. "Stellar null torpedoes. These were specialized null devices that could exit null space within the core of the targeted sun. Utilizing multiphasic shield technology, the torpedoes would keep the aperture open and allow a large volume of core matter to be displaced into null space. This would create a large void as the core material flowed through the aperture, much like what happens when a ship enters or exits null space within the atmosphere on a planet. When the shields finally failed, the null space aperture would close, and the gravitational pressure around the void would collapse into the now empty space, triggering an implosion within the core. The resultant shock wave would further compress the core, and the targeted sun would go critical within a day, sometimes hours depending on the age and composition of the sun." The human's eyes and mouth kept getting wider as Hrethnir described the weapon. It could see the horror the human was experiencing, and it took some time before he could speak again. "Jesus Christ. Are you telling me you made a weapon that could destroy the sun? Multiple suns? That no one should ever have that much power. If you could make them, others could, right?" "The Malit did not build the weapons. Your Magnati ancestors did. A team of 52 preeminent scientists and theoreticians collaborated together to develop the weapon system in secret. They were completely isolated from all others, even their families. And they did so willingly to help end the war. They built 50 of the devices and notified their superiors that the weapons were ready. When the military and government officials arrived to collect the weapons, they found all 52 of the researchers dead in the secret labs they had been working in for almost 2 cycles. They destroyed all the research and knowledge they had accumulated during the development of the weapon before committing ritual suicide with a poison they synthesized for themselves. Besides farewell letters to their families and their wills, they all signed a joint declaration explaining their actions and asking for forgiveness for what they had created in their search for a weapon to end the war. They felt the weapon they created was too evil to exist, and they decided among themselves to ensure the 50 devices they built would be the only ones ever made by the Galactic Federation. Sadness crossed the human's features, and Hrethnir waited as he bent his head and whispered a prayer before looking back up at it and speaking. They killed themselves? That's terribly sad, and I hope they were recognized for their willingness to sacrifice themselves to ensure such abominations could never be made again. Some were incensed that they presumed to know better and judged the morality of the weapons, but many were greatly affected by the suicides and vowed to make the sacrifices of the scientists mean something. All 50 devices were taken and the labs became sacred tombs. Where was I? Ah yes, the expeditionary fleet was now in enemy territory, and they fought many battles as they made their way ever deeper into Balrican space to find appropriate targets for the 50 devices. Entire solar systems were laid to waste as the fleet swarmed through them, using kinetic bombardments and antimatter bombs to destroy the populations and infrastructure that supported the Balrican war machine. Systems with only Balricans were wiped out entirely, some with the devices, others with the bombardments I spoke of. It depended on the level of infrastructure and population numbers. And systems with conquered populations that suffered under the Balrican occupations? Did you exterminate those poor victims as well? Ray asked accusingly as he stared at Hrethnir in horror. Ray, this was a war for our very survival, and we were well within our rights to do what was necessary. However, the Magnati and the Wan-Sho commanders leading the forces refused to kill innocent species. The few species the Balricans did conquer were spared extermination, but their infrastructure was destroyed, and strike teams were landed with weapons and equipment to arm the populace and lead uprisings against their oppressors. They volunteered to be left behind, and the fleet continued to press deeper towards the more developed regions and core worlds as they fought off numerous Balrican counterattacks. After many solar months, they finally reached the heart of Balrican space, and the remaining 42,000 warships of the expeditionary force split themselves into 4 large fleets of over 10,000 ships each. Dozens of solar systems were purged, dozens of suns were destroyed, and still, more Balrican ships came to fight us and prevent further penetration. It was only then that we realized our error. What error, Hrethnir? Ray asked as he reached for the cup of water without looking away from Hrethmir's visual implants. It waited until the human finished drinking before responding. We had been operating under the assumption the Balricans would have a homeworld that was surrounded by a network of core worlds in the center of their territory. We assumed they would have a unified government that controlled them and their war effort. It wasn't until we captured and interrogated a high-ranking clan leader that we realized what we were truly facing, and the futility of our eradication efforts. They could never be forced to surrender, and there was no true central government to decapitate. They are a clan-based species, and they are nomads, Ray. There was no government to destroy, and they left their home world because they destroyed it themselves, rendering it uninhabitable during their first crusade against their own species. They took their clan system and nomadic lifestyle into space with them. That is what we faced. Ray's brow furrowed in concentration as he looked away from Hrethnir and thought about what it just told him. Hrethnir waited patiently as it allowed the human to analyze the situation with the Balricans. After a few moments, Hrethnir could see the understanding dawning on his face as he realized what the Galactic Federation was dealing with, and he looked towards Hrethnir again. I see it now, Hrethnir. Unless you hunt down and kill every single Balrican in the galaxy, they will always return. Since they are nomadic clans, there are no governments or worlds you could destroy to deliver the final killing blow and end the war. You would need to kill every one of them to end the war. And if even a few of them escaped, they would just move to another area and rebuild. Only their total extinction would end them and prevent another war. Pride surged through Hrethnir at the insight the human was able to quickly glean from limited data despite not being of the warrior class. They truly are worthy inheritors, Hrethnir thought as it responded. Precisely so, my human. If even a remnant survived, it would not be us who would be dealing with them again. It would be our descendants who would have to deal with a resurgent Balrican crusade. Faced with this daunting reality, the expeditionary fleet set about on their task of the complete eradication of the hateful creatures. The noble warriors of the fleet became exterminators as they cleansed entire worlds. Scouts were sent to find the solar systems with the largest concentration of Balrican populations, and we used the last 14 devices on those suns, committing great evil to finally end the war. By this time, the fleet stocks were running low, and much of the fleet needed repair and refit. The decision was made to conquer a system with the infrastructure and resources necessary to establish a viable base. A system was found that suited our purposes, and the fleet retreated to it and invaded. After wiping out the inhabitants, we seized the infrastructure and retooled it for our purposes. We fortified the system, built the necessary support infrastructure to repair and resupply our ships, and we fought off repeated attempts by the Balricans to eject us from the heart of their territory. They went into a frenzy, my human. It seemed as if our seizure and occupation of a system within the heart of their territory was sacrilegious and an affront that they could not tolerate. Fleet after fleet after fleet came, and the expeditionary forces suffered severe attrition despite our victories. As our warship numbers dwindled, the fleet commanders grew increasingly concerned about the success of their mission. Ships and drones were sent back to the Federation to gather additional forces and reinforce our depleted fleet, which now numbered just over 20,000 combat-capable warships. Ray's mouth opened in shock at the losses suffered by the powerful and advanced Federation forces. They lost 2/3 of their combat power? How many Balrican ships did they destroy during the invasion? Over 200,000 Balrican ships, Hrethnir answered, holding up a hand to stop the human from responding. That is not to say 200,000 warships, Ray. Remember, they are nomadic. We noticed a marked decline in actual warships after the many battles fought during the invasion, and now they were using technicals, as you so aptly termed them during one of our previous discussions. There were still warships, but most of what we were facing during their attempts to reclaim the system were locally available ships that had basic weaponry and armor plating quickly installed, and most of their combat power was still fighting the Federation forces in the Orion Arm. I came across an expression during my studies of your conflicts. I believe it is quantity has a quality all its own, and was said by one of the evilest humans to ever exist in reference to a war of attrition. Such was the case here, my human. Despite the technological disparity and the severe disadvantages, the hateful creatures would still eventually defeat the expeditionary forces because they simply had the numbers to do so. It was at this time that the ships we sent to bring reinforcements finally returned. Only 2,000 additional warships accompanied them, and those would be the last they would ever receive due to A confused expression on his face, Ray rudely interrupted Hrethnir again. Why only 2,000 ships? Surely there were more warships available to support and reinforce the expeditionary forces? Hrethnir carefully modulated its voice to hide the anger it was feeling before answering him coldly. This was the third time the human had interrupted it, and Hrethnir was incensed by the repeatedly rude behavior. Do not interrupt me again, human. It is disrespectful, and I will not tolerate such inconsiderate behavior from you again. You may be kin and a friend, but I am still Malet and an honored elder of the governing council. The human looked surprised and then deeply hurt before looking down as Hrethnir scolded him, and he did not respond or look back up after Hrethnir had finished. It could see the human's hands start to tremble slightly as he continued to avoid looking at Hrethnir. After a few moments, the human child turned away from Hrethnir and presented his back to it as he lay on his side. Regret for what it had done filled Hrethnir as the child finally spoke, directing his words at the wall he was facing. Please leave, honored elder. I am tired, and I wish to sleep, he said softly in a quavering voice thick with emotion. Hrethnir stared at the human's back, feeling terrible for scolding the child. It was just about to apologize when it heard the door slide open and the doctor came over to stand next to Hrethnir. You will depart at once, honored elder. My diagnostic equipment is showing signs of elevated emotional distress from my patient. Leave us, now. Hrethnir backed away from the doctor, surprised by the anger as it demanded Hrethnir leave at once. The raised volume of the doctor's medsuit only reinforced its command. Malit doctors were well known for being extremely protective of their patients, and Hrethner knew better than to defy the one that just ordered it to leave, honored elder or not. Hrethner turned around and exited the medical suite, stopping to look through the clear polyglass at the human child. The doctor looked back and noticed it looking into the suite from outside and flicked a finger. The polyglass privacy function activated, and Hrethner found itself staring at its own reflection on the now silvery surface. "You are an arrogant fool," it thought accusingly to the reflection staring back at it. Hrethner sadly turned away and headed back to its quarters, feeling like its friendship with the human child it loved deeply was irrevocably damaged. Ignoring all the other Malit it walked past along the way, Hrethner entered the quarters and stopped in front of the chair it had specially made for the human child by a Malit artisan with imported materials. It had let the chair remain where it was in the hopes that the human would recover and use the gift again. Regret filled Hrethner, and it sat in the chair for the first time, using the lever to extend it and lay back. Now fully extended and looking up at the shimmering ceiling above it, Hrethner flicked a finger. A holo screen appeared, the time index displaying the date and time of the holo video. It was a recording of their first time meeting each other, and Hrethner activated the playback. As it heard the human child introduce himself for the first time, Hrethner felt ashamed of its arrogant behavior. "I hope you forgive me, my human." "I am sorry," Hrethner thought as it continued to watch the holo screen above it. A deep loneliness entered its spirit, and Hrethner allowed itself to be swallowed by the emotion.